Hi everyone. All right. Um, God is actually bringing me back to. So I did a calendar, and I need to mark. How am I going to mark that page? Oh, here we go. I have this thing right here that I can use. Mark that page. Okay. So the last time I came on, I talked about the the peace and the dream that I had regarding the demons that were coming. This was God's way of showing me that I was delivered, that I no longer had the previous life that's still attached to me. Okay. Um, and I haven't looked at these notebooks since I wrote them. I mean, he's had me go into them a few times, but never like really diligently thought about the things that are contained within these books or in these notebooks. And God had been showing me 150 days and 100. So whenever I would go somewhere, like say for example, I'm planning my vacation for my birthday, I would say T minus, and I would count down the days, and then I would count down the minutes. And we don't know how God is going to use this. We don't know how God is going to determine at what point it's going to start your countdown, right? So I was looking at this and I actually did write out when I left my apartment from California. I moved out to live in my car on December 9th, which is Keslev 15, which it was a Friday. And the scripture at the time that kept coming up in my head was, pray it is not in winter that you are forced to go into the wilderness. And when it happened to me, I was like, oh, this is bad, because it's cold, it's rainy in California, where I was, because I was on the coast. The temperature would drop 38, 25 degrees, and so here I am in my truck, very no gas, no way to move, and I've got to lay in my truck with a blanket, a pillow, and then I literally would put on layers of clothes. And that was, back then, I realized that God taking me out for runs and taking me out for hiking and things like that, that was to teach me how to layer up. So I put thinner layers on the bottom, that were breathable. And then I would build up the layers thicker and thicker and thicker until I got to my jacket, and then I would wear my jacket. Which at the time I didn't fit into very well because I was bigger than I am now. Now I've lost quite a bit of weight. And so October 19th was the last day that I worked for Prudential. I had enough money to carry me through until November 26th, which is when I ran out of money. And I didn't realize I had left that early. Like it was, so I had paid rent and I had food in my refrigerator. I had all this, reserves. And God said it's not going to take as long as it did back then. When I left my apartment on December 9th, I did not get a job until December 27th, which was a Tuesday. Now, back then, I was in a hurry. I wasn't listening. I was ahead of where God was wanting me to be. Like, he didn't want me to leave on October 19th. He wanted me to leave. He's like, get ready, get ready, get ready. This time, I waited for him. I'm like, you know what, Father, if I get fired, I get fired. I'm not leaving. I'm going to be on your time. And so, looking back, I was like, ooh, I really, I was really ahead of where I should have been. Had I, hindsight being 2020, that's 2 months. You know, I left my job on November 26th. I got hired on December 27th. That's a month longer than I expected to be unemployed. And it was just, looking back, I was like, wow, like I really, the fear was so strong and it was so gripped within me that God needed me to do this. He needed me to go through this to show me his hand in pulling me out of that. I mean, I was homeless. I had no money, no car, because my car was dead in the water. Like, they could come by any moment and tow me because I was in an area where I wasn't supposed to be parking. And after I started moving, that's what happened. A lot of the cars that were there, that you know, police and such, the city officials kept driving by and seeing these vehicles in the same place every single time. You know, a lot of the other vehicles were abandoned. They looked dilapidated. They looked like they were run down. It looked like they hadn't been moved in a long time. When I was living in my car, I made it sure that it looked like I was moving, even though I wasn't moving. It made it sure that it looked like I was moving. I would come out of my truck at certain times of the day. I would come out of my, you know, in the morning and in the evening, still with allowing myself to be discreet so nobody knew that I was living in my car. And there were others that you could visibly see were living in the cars. And they got knocks by the police saying, you got to move. You can't live here. You can't be here. And so I never got a knock. So I knew I was protected in that sense. And then when I started working, God would have me go back there to go to sleep. And so God had stopped me from paying my car payment. This was 2022. I stopped paying my car payment in 2021. So it was almost a full year. Or it was a full year at that point. It was a year and a half. And a man, while I was parked at the beach, came up to me and told me, the finance company wants their vehicle back. And I was like, this is my car. This is my home. Like, I don't have anywhere else to live. And he goes, I understand. I'm not going to take your car. But somebody else is. Just be aware of that. And I said, okay. So it was always in the back of my mind. And God said, you're going to have to let it go eventually, not now. And he protected me. I hadn't paid my car payment since 2021. And I didn't get it taken away until... Hey, it's okay. It's okay. Shh. The truck did not get taken away until 2023. Okay. So now I'm going on a year and some months, because it was a year in November that they took it away. And so, in looking back through my notes, I didn't realize I had written out. So he showed me 14.32, which I rearranged. Sorry, guys. Which I rearranged to be 4, 3, 2, 1. And then God goes, but read it the other way. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I had no idea that my new beginning would be on the 8th anniversary of my divorce. And it would be in reverse. So first thing I lost was my marriage. Next thing I lost was my home, next thing I lost was my truck, my first truck, the one that was paid for, the one that was, if this was, I wouldn't have had all of these issues had that truck not been taken away from me. And so I was going out and I had it parked in one place, but a friend told me, move it and park it to this other place, which is safer. And my truck was totaled because there was an individual who was racing through the parking lot, and my truck happened to be, because there were cars when I left, but as the night got later and later, people started to leave, and my car ended up on the corner. So these individuals thought that they could slide. They were doing what is it called? Drifting. They were practicing their drifting skills. They needed to do more practice. So they were drifting through the parking lot, and they ended up hooking up. So my Dodge Ram had hooks at the front. They were for towing. And they hooked themselves. And God now tells me, oh, it's because I was fishing. I was like, and he caught himself a big fish. And so Lucifer wanted me to, like Jacob, or no, not like Jacob, like Job. He said, of course she loves you. You've taken care of her all her life. I mean, every time she's gotten into a situation, you've bailed her out. Every time she's gotten into a bad thing or she's made bad choices, you've bailed her out. Or every time someone came against her, you protected her. Of course she loves you. Of course she lays herself at her feet for you. And so he's told God, let me have her for a season. I'll bet you she'll be running away from you faster than you can say. He obviously didn't know my heart. He obviously didn't learn from Job. So, God says there is no new thing under the sun, yet he does it in a new way. See, Lucifer thought, oh, he's going to pick another man. God's like, nope. Oh, pick my daughter. Because it's the daughter's turn to be redeemed. The sons have already been redeemed. Jesus redeemed the men. Okay. Now, remember, God first created Adam. Adam was the man that was supposed to be in charge of the life that God created. And so, this is according to God's will, God's plan. This has always been according to God's will and God's plan. So, he redeemed his men first. Yes, in that, and it's funny because yesterday I was listening to Bull for Christ, and this is exactly what she said. She talked about the 5,000 men that were fed by Jesus, the 5,000 men who were fed by Peter, and I had no idea this was how God was going to go in this direction. So he first redeemed his sons. And he did that through Jesus. Yes, he redeemed the entire world from our sins. But remember, God doesn't see us as his creation. He sees as male because we came from the man. Okay? So we are part of the man. So because this happened, because Jesus gave his life willingly and freely for our sins, we're part of man's rib. We came out of the rib. That's why when, oh Lord, wow, that's why when the centurion stabbed Jesus in the chest, in the rib, okay, in the rib, water and blood flowed. His daughters are the water. His sons are the blood. Because they were created first, okay? The ladies, the women, the daughters were created second. And so together, we make the perfect union because we represent God as one. And so, oh my goodness. So this was in 2022 is when all of this happened to me. Okay, 2022 is when God gave me dreams. And I mean, He gave me a lot of dreams. And that's, on 12/17, He gave me a dream about the women the women that were in my friend group that I thought were friends, and how they excluded me from parties. They excluded me from inviting me to different things because now I look back, I realize they were jealous. They were jealous of the light that I carried within me. They wanted to push me down. They wanted to have me remove all of my godly desires. Back then I was ambitious. I had dreams. I had goals that I had wanted to achieve. I wanted to travel. I wanted to see the world. I wanted to be not part of the world, but experience the world that God created. That's what I wanted. And so these women, they didn't like it. And, so here it is, 12/17, 12/18, He gave me another dream. 12/19, He gave me another dream. And then 12/19, there was a second dream. Then we come to the dream where I had no idea that this was going to be about the life that I was going to live. So in 12/22/2022, I was no longer living in my car, or I was no longer living in my apartment. I've been crying, I've been praying, I've been at this point fasting. I went November 26th was the last time I had food. No, December 9th. It was December 11th, going into Monday, December 12th. I no longer had any food. So that began my fasting, 12/12/2022. A lot of twos. I did not get food until I know I wrote it down somewhere. Just before, the week before I started working is when so I'm going to go back to this. Okay. I ran out of food on December 12th. On December 18th of 2022, Panera Bread left a trash bag full of bread. And I only took bread enough for 5 days, because that's what God said. He said take more, but I said, no, Father, I need to leave bread for others. And so before the 5 days of bread on December 18th, there was a couple of days where God would send me out. I was starving. Exerting energy was the last thing I wanted to do, but I was obedient. And there were these fruit trees along my path. And God would drop fruit. And I would pick it up. And I'd clean it. And then I'd eat it. And I'd give some to my dog. And I'd share with him. And one day I was walking through this parking lot, and there was a bench. And on top of the bench, there was a container of food. God said, open it. Inside the container of food was and it was separated. I never thought I'd have to tell this story. I really thought I was going to have this go with me to my end, but I opened up the container. Half of the sandwich had been eaten, and they was separated from the other part of the sandwich. I tried the salad and stuff that was in there. I didn't like it, but the sandwich was delicious, and so I ate half of it, and the other half I shared with my dog. And so then I asked God, I'm like, I don't know why, God, but I really want a donut. Like, I really, 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 really want a donut. I had no money. I couldn't go buy a donut. As I was walking by, there was a bag on the floor, a white bag. And God said, pick it up. And I picked it up. Inside were 2 uneaten, untouched donuts. Almost like someone dropped it on their way home, on their way to wherever they were going. And I looked at my dog and I said, oh my gosh, we've got donuts. And this is before the 5 days of bread. I never looked down at the things that Father gave me. I never looked at it the way the world looks at it. Ew, no way, I'm not touching that. It's been on the floor. Ooh, gross, nope. I'm homeless. I have no job and God is feeding me. How dare I not take what he hands me and receive? So yeah, he humbled me. He humbled me to the point where, because before I would never have anyone help me. I would be like, no, I'm fine. I'm good. I got this. Now I'm receiving God's help. I'm receiving the people that God has to help me. I never thought I'd have to say this. On December 22nd, 2022, which was a Thursday, is when God gave me the dream about the Mean Girls. And it's funny to me because even in my dream, I had the movie very present about the Mean Girls. Now back then, I had no peace. None whatsoever. I was freaking out. I was on my knees. I was praying to God. Every 5 seconds, my phone didn't work. I had no phone service. In order for me to get phone service, I would have to walk uphill. No food, no money. I would have to walk uphill. The only thing I had was containers for water. I would go and I would get water every day. For four weeks, my dog and I had no food. You know? His food ran out a little bit after mine did. And so when this dream came about, I did not even think about it. But God did call the girls Mean Girls when I was working there. But it never clicked in my head that this is the dream that he was trying to talk to me about. Because when it's not time, it's not time. And it's not until now that I'm no longer in that situation that I'm going, you know, is he really the one? Maybe I was wrong. Because now I'm questioning it. And God's like, no. We're done questioning. You know because you know. Because I told you. And so when Bold for Christ started talking about the 5,000 men, and he calls me Peter because I'm the fisherman of men, and I was like, what? And I did. I cast my net. I didn't catch anything. He goes, cast your net again. I didn't catch anything. Tossed my net again. Didn't catch anything. I'm like, okay, God. Either this man is not mine or something's wrong. And he goes, you're just casting your net in the wrong area. And I was like, what? So he had me cast my net at work. And I caught a fish. And I was like... Now remember, I have been talking about him throughout the time I worked there. And how there was one incident where I went up to him and I said, "Hey," now I'm going to say his name because there's 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 revelation that's happened to come across my eyes yesterday, and so his name is Benjamin. Okay, we call him Ben for short, or he goes by Ben for short. And I went up to Ben and I was like, "Hey Ben," I was like, "I just got another one, a delivery," and he goes, "Sweet," and I said, "And guess what?" He goes, "What?" "I got you $20 tip." Now, at the time, he was making pennies, like $10, $5, $8. He wasn't making $20. He wasn't making double digits. Double digits started when I started, because he told me. And I'm like, "So on average, like, what's your tip range?" And he goes, "Oh, it's really not that great. It's between $5 and $10, or $5 and $8." He goes, "People don't really tip very well." And I looked at him and I said, "That's about to change." And he's like, "Whatever." So at that point, the tips that were from the orders that I took, they started going 12, 15, 16. That was the range. It went from $5 to $8 to $10 to $18, We became friends first because I always wanted to be friends with the man that I'm going to be united with, the man that's meant to be with me for the rest of my life. And that was one of my requests for God, was he needs to be my friend. It can't just be some random stranger that I'm like, "Oh my gosh, you're beautiful love." No. I had boundaries. I had expectations. I said, I need him to be my friend first. I need him to care about me as an individual first before he falls in love with everything else. And so basically falling in love with my character, falling in love with my flaws, falling in love with my my attitude, falling in love with my weirdness, falling in love with my mind, the way I think, the way I talk, the way I laugh, the way just everything except the exterior. I mean, I know I'm attractive. Trust me. That's not the problem. I've had men talk to me my entire life because the children of God are attractive to people. It doesn't matter. Men, women, we're attractive. Young, old, ancient, we're attractive to them. Our light is attractive to them. Okay, so they come to us and they, "Hey, what's going on? How you doing? Yeah, you wanna hang out?" No. So I didn't want some stranger, out of the blue, "Oh, I'm in love with you," because I didn't trust that. Okay, I didn't trust that behavior. So I told God, I want him to be a friend. I want him to be someone, and I've always wanted to work with my husband. If you're going to partner with someone, you need to know if you can handle being with them day in and day out. We don't spend more time out. We don't spend the one place we spend the most time is at work. And if the person you work with is able to put up with your attitude, put up with your nonsensical thinking, when you get into a bad mood, because we are who we are at work. Like, we don't go there expecting to find love. We don't go there expecting to find romance. I do. But I'm not looking for it, okay? If it happens, great. If it doesn't, then it's okay. But I become friends with everyone. There is no one in that workplace I don't become friends with. I know their lives. I know their aspirations. I know their dreams. I know their goals. And I help them along the way because God unctions me. He's like, "Ooh, that person needs your support, needs your help, needs your..." because you've been there, you've done that, you've gone through this before. And so I start sharing my knowledge. I start sharing my experiences. And every person that I've ever talked to has always welcomed my my intellect, my information. And so Ben is the one that starts, because at this point I don't know him. I know the people that I work with up front, and I'm friendly with them, because when you work with someone directly, it becomes an easier interaction. Now, he's a delivery driver. I don't see him very often. He tends to help out in the kitchen a lot, and I'm not in the kitchen very often. So I'm doing my job. I'm coming back there. Now, when I was first working for the pizza restaurant, Peter Piper, they taught me to look for names, not numbers, because people are not numbers. People have a lot of, and trust me, there were people that would come up to the counter and be like, "I'm sorry, but I'm not a number." And I'm like, "I know, but I don't have your name, and all I have is your order number." And they're like, "Oh, okay." Like, sorry, I know you're not a number, but would you prefer that I call you out by the order that you ordered? And they're like, "How many people have the same order?" I'm like, I said, "Well, you ordered a pepperoni pizza and you ordered a special." I said, "I have 6 tickets with the same order." And they're like, "Oh, well, I guess that wouldn't work with it." And I'm like, "No." And I said, "But now that I know that you have a yellow shirt with black pants, I can call out a yellow shirt and black pants." And they start laughing. So I would make a tense situation a little less tense by using my humor. And I've used that throughout my entire life. Like, God has me use humor to break the ice, to encounter people and be able to bring them into God's light. And so I was not expecting, because I'm still new in this position. I'm not trying to be like, who's the cute one here? Like the girls though. This is how they started. They're like, "Who do you think is the hottest manager?" And they're naming off names, and I'm like, "No, he's my boss. I'm not gonna go there." No, he's like my son. Not gonna go there. And then they said the crew chief's name, and I'm like, "Oh, to the no." And they're like, "Damn, that was a strong reaction." I said, "He's Mexican. He's probably family. Not touching that." Yeah, my family is very, very diverse in terms of how many people are part of my family. And so these girls were trying to get me to say who I was interested in. I'm like, "No." And one of the girls says Ben's name. In that moment is when I looked back, because Ben was standing next to the big boss. And I call him the big boss because it stops me from calling him what God wants me to call him. And I would call him the big boss to himself,